った一つたった一つのたった一人たった一人の私はここ
Reparations on the table, nigga, we ain't seen shit. Put us under pressure, nigga, we ain't even sweat. Came out shining like a diamond in the middle with some mess. On Martin Luther King, bitch, we coming for a check. Headed to the Capitol to stake my feelings in the mind of a radical. You can't ride with me. I'm my only witness when I handle my business. Pull it from their hips, say bye-bye, Billy. No more time for no coasting. I'm on the highway focused. I ain't even smoking, I'm just riding my emotion. Both eyes open, I'm just trying to keep calm. Put an extra set of eyes on them doing recon. Knee deep in snow, say you try and keep going. Told him get up out the cold before my nigga deform. Every old wound seem to getting retorn. I'ma write deep poems to a nigga reborn. I'ma make a statement before I make it out alive. No Channel 5, I would rather make it live. Before the news try to make a nigga out alive. But the pain in my eyes on a much bigger prize. 5-0 on both hands in the sky. Little do they know it's no plan to survive. I ain't finna give them no chance to decide. I'ma put they feet in both hands in the fire. Dancing in the fire like Eshak. You gon' test the water, never get both feet wet. We done overexposed the city defense to the overexposure indecent. They don't know they diving in the deep end. Ain't no way that they surviving through the weekend. Everything glowing in the flash like a beacon. Drowned in the flames, it's too late to let it sink in. Got 10 ways I can be vengeful. Sitting on 10 grenades, every last pinful. This guerrilla war, they don't know what they in for. I can hear them at the door trying to move in slow. I can hold them off, I got 3 shots. Taking every soul for at least 3 blocks. I can smell the fire burning through the sheetrock. Seeing bodies in the flame, nigga try and reach out. This is how you practice what you finna speak out. Thinking about the facts that they try to leave out. This is for my roots running through the deep south. Dying for a cause, what we finna beef out. If you ain't about the cause, what you finna beef out. Showing up deep, we gon' bring the streets out. Every man line up, showing what your street bout. An independent state, what a nigga need now.
Ryu, this is crazy.
Yeah. Watch. Y'all already know what time it is, huh? Watch. Tell them keep playing dumb like ain't nobody a witness. Swear to God on my mama. Everybody gon' get it out. Everybody that's with them out. Cause everybody I lit them out. Keep playing dumb like ain't nobody a witness. Swear to God on my mama. Everybody gon' get it out. Everybody that's with them out. Cause everybody, I lit them out. Niggas can't stand on shit, we leave them stretched out. Finna get a medal of honor, we bringin' vex out. And you get stepped on every time you step out. You not a stepper where you from, you a step down. And stop reppin' where you from, you a let down. Can't be seen where you from, you keep your head down. That fat nigga mention my name, I'm breaking lead out. RIP another boss nigga, I think he bled out. He ain't gon' make it, I'm taking another head count. COVID so hot, I keep him from leaving beds out. Niggas self-snitching on live, bringing the fans out. They the last nigga took a O talking about how he dead now. You don't know your life too short, that had me stressed out. Somewhere he took a wrong turn, I on the death route. Try the little boy yard blue, I bring the chef out. Put a whole drum on the 9, that bitch attack now. Keep playing dumb like ain't nobody a witness. Swear to God on my mama, everybody gon' get it out. Everybody that's with them out. Cause everybody I hit them up. Keep playing dumb like ain't nobody a witness on my mama. Swear to God, everybody gon' get it out. Everybody that's with them out. Cause everybody I let them out. You can cry all you want, but I don't do tissue. So the guy you don't get through if you let blue get you. I put Nino on that mag, let my boo get you. Making playboy moves with that new issue. When you surrounded by them snakes, you don't know who bit you. And that's the problem with you fakes, you don't know who hit you. And if I'm trying to make it shake, I don't care who with you. Call me Bruce MBD Sam, I got 2 pistols. AOI, a bunch of lanes, don't let that shoe fit you. And you better keep them tight, don't let that shoe fit loose. I can't miss, everything got shoe hit you. I ain't friendly, ain't shit, but blue been cool. And you know I don't forget them like an elephant. Ayo, and the eye really irrelevant. Assed out, and we know we lacking intelligence. Keep them out your circle before you regret you let them in.
Ryu, this is crazy. To the Dark Side family. Appreciate everybody that's in the building. Appreciate everybody that's in the building. Um, this ain't gonna be a long show at all. We'll knock this out real quick. Just a few things I kind of wanted to go over. I don't think I have really. I think that was kind of maybe overlooked, or maybe I didn't do a good enough job of necessarily explaining in my debate with Taz. And so I definitely wanted to kind of go over that. And And so based on the title, as you can see, this is the title is really what my debate for me, what my argument was based on, right? And so my argument was more so centered not around the weaknesses of the black woman, but more so I was trying to highlight more so the strength of women, or not only just black women, but women in general. And and also um, how how what we kind of call sometimes protection and different things like that a lot of times ends up being more so us being in the way. And so one of the ways that we when we talk about different freedoms and different situations, a lot of times we see a lot of people end up in bad positions or bad situations based on their economic situations, right? And so a lot of times we'll wonder, you know, um, why somebody is necessarily staying in what we would call some sort of abusive relationship, and a lot of times it's because of 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 the comfort that they get financially, right? And sometimes that financial comfort it can kind of overshadow what you may know is best, right? Shout out to Karate Introvert, appreciate you in the building. Shay Love in the building, appreciate you, right? And so even when we so like when we talk about like in general, how we kind of look at the situation when we talk about what is true freedom. Well, true freedom you would need the financial ability to be free, right? And so a lot of times what happens is we're kind of set up in a system where the mother is kind of left on the back burner, and the mother is actually put in a situation where she's not necessarily she doesn't where you can make an argument, yes, she's free to go and do whatever she wants, but she's not necessarily in the prime position financially to really say that she can actually be financially free, right? And so part of what we'll kind of be getting into, this is actually an argument that W.E.B. Du Bois actually poses, and this is one that I have to say I agree with. Um, and so a lot of people were talking about, what are the different dynamics that kind of break down our family structure in ways. But I think a lot of times there there's not necessarily a breakdown in the family structure per se, but a lot of times it's how we view the family structure. And so I think it different types of family structures get demonized. I believe Taz is one that always the argument that the stepdad is always somebody that is also demonized in a way, right? And so in that saying, you know what I mean, in itself, that's something that's crazy. I think they had a program, I think he was saying that where I guess the dudes were doing wanted to put something together for kids in the community and they were ostracized for it, right? And so I think a lot of times that what that just goes to say is how people view different dynamics. I think decisions is one thing, but I think overall um how that affects you, uh that's where it comes to being inhumane. And I think the way mothers are treated in the system is just downright inhumane. But we'll go ahead and get into it real quick. And so in the debate, the title of the debate was, is the black woman's relationship to the system detrimental to the black family? right? And so the my like I said, my argument wasn't based on necessarily um necessarily blaming her necessarily for the dynamics in the family, but I think more so was just dealing with, I think, the reliance on the system or on the need of what we believe is protection of certain things. I think ends up leaving them vulnerable. And I think in a lot of ways, I think we kind of created an environment based on the systems that we created to where the same people who are supposed to be necessarily protecting end up also being the ones who are abusers. And so you end up having to toe the fine line with that, with the people who are most vulnerable. And so I think the smartest thing to do in some sort of system like that, then, or when you know that that's the type of world that you live in, is that the rules have to be based around the people who are the most vulnerable in the circle, right? Because you are, like we always say on the team, you're only as strong as your weakest link. So in a way, yeah, it's bringing them up, but at the same time, you need that it's not coddling or or necessarily this protection, but it's more so about an empowerment, right? So the idea is to empower people. Appreciate you, Juju. Appreciate you in the building. And so a lot of people, like I said, a lot of people kind of, gloss over that. And I think it kind of bleeds over into the psyche of how we view women in general. And I think a lot of times when women or children or in general, people who are vulnerable in our society are viewed like that, a lot of times people feel like it's they have the right to now either take advantage of their space or necessarily they get a chance to also take advantage of of what they deem as authority over them, right? Because now it becomes this game of who's lesser and who's more in this power struggle. And a lot of times that's dealing with the ego, and that's something that, we have to practice to get over. I think, and that's something that we can help each other practice on. So a lot of times what happens is when we get into discussions, we say things that bruise the next person's ego. And all correction in that moment goes out of the window. And so if you can correct somebody without bruising the ego, then I think what your correction can be heard a lot clearer. So let me go ahead and get into this though. So when we talk about some of the points I was making was what is the black woman's relationship to the system, right? How it is detrimental to the black family. Then we was gonna get into sociology and anthropology, right? And we talking about the conjugal versus the consanguineal family, right? And why the black women should focus on each other, right? Or mothers should focus on each other working outside of the system in general. And the reason why one of the arguments I was making too is that we see actual success in that, and that's a society that that they can kind of guarantee themselves the trust. You know what I'm saying? So I think if like I said, if in a lot of ways it's we gotta build something where they're at the central point. And like I said, the most vulnerable in our society would be just mothers in general, right? Whether pregnant or uh, or had just actually had the baby. Shout out to Goldmine, appreciate you, God body. And so, um, let me go ahead and continue on this. Okay, so another point, right? So too much participation with the system and not enough participation with each other. So you can kind of make this as a general argument. The argument was kind of based around black women, but really this is kind of like an argument you can make for us in general. I think we have a lot more participation and belief in the system We pretend like it's not belief, but it really is, and not enough necessarily in each other. And I think that in itself puts us in a vulnerable state, and it kind of creates this distrust amongst each other, right? And that's something we got to get over. Two, it also creates a standard not healthy to our community, right? I'll be using the W.E.B. Du Bois for that. Like I said, that's pretty much the main focal on my discussion tonight. Um, Pretty much is from W.E.B. Du Bois, right? And so, how there are no rules to how a healthy family is structured, right? So, when we talk about how a healthy family is structured, I think in general, when we talk about a healthy family or developing healthy people, not that's going to come from healthy people. And so, I think a lot of times we weigh too much in on exactly who's involved and who's there, and not enough on who's healthy. And I think that's a big part also when we talk about a family structure is healthy people actually being able to raise and create more healthy people. How women have to band together outside of the system for self, right? Let me move this real quick so I can see. Outside of the system for self and for the family, right? So it makes a difference. I think in a lot of ways, I think in general, what we deal with in general, we have a situation where the women here especially outnumber the men significantly, right? And so I think in a lot of ways that kind of puts them in more vulnerable situations, especially depending on where they are necessarily populated at. And so I think which I'll also show where they actually have already created these different underground systems, right? That are actually able to where you can kind of see them networking for themselves outside of the system. Because a lot of times the same system too that they might go to protect them also leaves them in a vulnerable state or in a vulnerable place. And so a lot of times, a lot of cats will make the argument that, they're relying on the system and different things like that, but they're not necessarily relying on the system, kind of coerced into the system. And then on top of that, the system is kind of putting them in a vulnerable place where they not only have to rely on them, but they're also treated, in a manner that's just probably not fair. You know what I mean? They're not normal uh for most people. So when we talk about W.E.B. Du Bois, right, the Dark River, chapter 7, the condemnation of women. This is from page 180, right? He talks about the family group, however, which is the ideal of the culture, right, with which these folks have been born, is not based on the idea of an economically independent working mother. Rather, its ideal harks back to, basically well, part of his argument was his ideal harks back to basically more so the virgin, and that's kind of how like this system has kind of been built around. You can kind of even see to where they even kind of over sexualize that and kind of make that some sort of dynamic that that kind of like it kind of creates like a crazy dynamic to where even more people are kind of predator, more predators towards that direction and stuff like that. And you kind of see, um, even as age goes on, it's kind of a disrespect towards the beauty of them and different things like that. But if we keep going on, so now this is kind of W.E.B. Du Bois also point when he talks about the family dynamic, right? So he says among native white women, 1 in 10 is separated from her husband by death, divorce, or desertion, right? Among the Negroes, the ratio is 1 in 7. Is the cause racial, right? Then he goes, no, it's economic. Why? Because there is the same high ratio among the white foreign born. right? Amongst the white foreign born. So what he talks about right here, so he says that, and mind you, this is chapter 7. This is the condemnation of women, right? Page 180. So he says that the breaking up of the present family is the result of the modern working and sex conditions, and it hits the laborers with terrible force, right? So they talk about, and you gotta think at this time, I think they was probably working like maybe like 15 hours a week, maybe 20. So you got to think, you're talking about now, we got a situation of 40, 60 hours a week now. For a lot of people, is the norm. So you can only, so like I said, you're getting kind of pushed more so into conditions that are almost like what we call the Kevin Samuels model, to where it's almost um non-beneficial, right, to maneuver with, to think about creating a family or doing any of that type of thing. It becomes more so um, something that a lot of people claim to be a hindrance. And like I said, that's why in a way, we have to kind of be careful that we're not putting a price on everything, right? And so, what he says that the Negroes are put in a peculiar and difficult position because the wages of the male breadwinner is below the standard, right? While the opening for colored women in certain lines of the domestic work and now in the industries are many. And so we can even kind of see that shift today, to where I think a lot of and it just kind of depends on the labor jobs, and a lot of the ones that kind of are vital to society, based on the incentives. They're not necessarily giving the incentives for you to kind of work those jobs. And so I think like when even the way that we may look at um somebody who's, well, yeah, somebody who cleans up the hospital, right? Somebody who cleans up the hospital as opposed to the person who's committing, who's actually doing the surgery, right? And not only the pay gap, but the respect level that that person gets also is a dangerous like ideology to have in a society, right? Because the person that's cleaning up the hospital room is just as vital to your surgery as the person that's actually opening you up. I mean that, and that's just simple. You don't you don't want to be inside of a dirty operating room getting ready to be opened up. You can see how that looks. And so both sides are kind of vital to the society, but there's less of an incentive on one, not only in pay, but also how the social, like the social status or the respect that it also gets in the society, right? And so a lot of that becomes dangerous for us to have as a mentality, even when we kind of think about like in general, um, even like this like some of like the dogma that's used against somebody that they would call like maybe the garbage man or whatnot. But it's like one thing you hate is when when you miss the garbage man and you got trash like running over. You know what I'm saying? It's not only is it not a good look, but that's not something that you necessarily, you know, that's not something that you would necessarily happy about, and you don't necessarily have a means to get rid of it. So the garbage man is very vital also in society and keeping not everything clean. I think even I think even sometimes um I think a lot of the luxuries and the different things that we enjoy, I think the people, a lot of the labor class is the way that you're able to enjoy it. And so without that class, then in general, you're talking about like a breakdown in society, because now you leave people doing for themselves more, which is that kind of eliminates exactly the whole point of actually getting to the money or get, you know, certain positions or certain statuses that they necessarily want. And so I think it's 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 one thing that we necessarily have the pay gap, but I think a major issue is I think the how they're looked at in the in the current social structure in general. I think, like I said, we gotta be careful not only with that, but also even the standard to pay for these type of things. I think we kind of got to be careful with that because they both, like I said, they both are going to go hand in hand. Right. So we talk about how the nuclear family structure was forced upon the present day black families, right? So we go on to talk about, in addition to the dispersal of the families, the nuclear family model discourages African rooted practices such as community fostering, fictive kinship, and social fathering, right? So a lot of ways, a lot of the traditions that we kind of came over here with, because a lot of times in different dynamics, um, they're not necessarily relying on the relationship of the people of the two people who had sex. I think because, and a lot of times that's because there's a lot of emotion involved. I think most communities kind of understand where the emotion can kind of be involved at, and not only can that type of emotion be kind of wearing uh on mental health, but in a lot of times it can be kind of it can be kind of something that can also be damaging on necessarily the kids, right? And so I think, like, in a lot of ways, I think a lot of times when we talk about who's having kids, for the most part in our community, I think we talk about it as if they're grown people, and but a lot of times we talk about kids that are having kids. And so it's one thing to have kids that are having kids, but now the whole structure on how that family would still uphold to where we can make sure that we producing a healthy set of kids out of this, that's kind of broken down now. And it's just left on the kid to figure it out. And that's a different thing of a kid figuring out how to raise a family from somebody that's a little bit further along, 20, 25, or something like that. That's a big difference. Right. And so I think a lot of times, I think I think certain situations that we kind of look at, I think people kind of have to, I think people kind of have to have a way that we kind of look and kind of understand what position we're in, and what and how we can kind of get back to creating more so of a healthy community or a healthy environment, to where we kind of understand where things are more not only reliable, but people in the next generation continue to be protected. And I think by the better that we are more focused on healthy people creating healthy people, I think in that instance, um, the other problems that we're looking at are kind of be able to kind of go out of the window. And a lot of times that takes place by the elders making more so of the decisions in these instances. And I think we, even though we have a disc, sometimes we don't necessarily have the elders in our family. I think kind of trying to rebuild the connection with the elders in our community is something that's also um, that's also could be smart for us. Maybe it's, and that I think in this instance, this is where, in a lot of ways, the black church kind of comes into play at, you know, and in a lot of ways, I think we try to run from the black church, but in a lot of ways, that's still there. Um, as a foundation for us, not only for, just trying to raise healthy people, but also, being um for a lot of people still a safe place. And so yeah, I know it's a lot that goes on in certain places, but I've been to a lot of places that was actually safe places and good places with healthy people, and that was actually showing love. And so those places do exist. But let's talk about, when we talk about fictive kin, it means an individual who is not related by birth, adoption, marriage, or marriage to the child, but who has an emotionally significant relationship with the child, right? So in kinship care is the raising of children by by the grandparents or other extended family members within the fourth degree of kinship. And so a lot of times I think we get caught in a situation where the grandparents are some of the ones who get leaned on the heaviest a lot of times, right? Especially when we talk about kids raising kids. But I think also by there not being necessarily a community aspect to it, I think sometimes those grandparents aren't necessarily healthy either to be uh necessarily the only ones who are necessarily in charge of it of of uh of raising a healthy kid. But even if we do have healthy grandparents, I think even in that sort of system, I think it needs to be more of a collective, you know. Shout out to who raised you. I appreciate you in the building, God. More of a collective effort, to kind of give the grandparents, a hand in that. And so that is a dynamic that we do also see that kind of plays out still today. But I think sometimes when we talk about, what we end up seeing is that the grandparents have kind of gotten younger and younger also. So we talk about the nuclear family, right? Or also called the elementary family in sociology, right? In sociology and in anthropology, a group of people who are united by the ties of a partnership and parenthood, and consisting of a pair of adults, right, and their social and their social record and their socially recognized children, right? Simple and plain. So we talk about husband, wife, mother, father, son, daughter, brother, and sister are embodied by the people whose biological relationship do not necessarily conform to the Western definitions of these terms, right? So in matrilineal societies, for example, right, a child may be the responsibility not of his biological genitor, but of the mother's brother, who fulfills the roles of the typical Western fatherhood. Now, a lot of reasons why this may happen is because, so the mother, let's say that the mother side of the family necessarily has a tradition or 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 some sort of initiation process or whatever it is that she holds dearly to her name and all of that, and that she holds sacred, depending on it, and also her family's traits, right? In order to hold on to those traits, they would, what the system would be that her brother, that would be the reason why her brother would step in as that role, because not only to keep her family's tradition and system alive, because that's, she also has a right, because a lot of times in most, for the most part, in a patriarchal system, the woman has to basically lose herself, basically. And and a lot of times in our society, the woman's line or lineage is just as important, if not more important. And so a lot of times, that's why in matrilineal societies it'd be set up in that way, right? And this also ensures stability, right? This is also another thing. This is also a system that ensures stability. We keep going real quick. right? So here's just some examples of where, in general, the kind of the system in itself kind of has kind of failed us, right? And so we talk about even how during birth rate, some of the problems that we talk about Black women having. So it says not only are their concerns dismissed, but traumatic birthing experiences are so common that 1/4 of Black women report disrespect and abuse from the medical professionals in the hospital, right? So in a lot of ways, man, I think we're starting to get back into these type of systems where more people are kind of relying on doulas and more so, different ways of having like home births and stuff like that, different systems set up. And these are systems that more so are seen to be um, a way for us to kind of protect ourselves because we looking at like mainly a lot of the reasons that Black women are dying at these high rates. They believe a lot of it comes from just neglect in general, right? So let's keep when we keep going. In the New York State, the Department of Health found that 3 times more Black women died from pregnancy-related complications than white women, right? More than 60% of those deaths are preventable if appropriate care is given in a timely fashion, right? So we talk about life or death, the role of doulas in improving the Black maternal health, right? And so Black women are more at risk of complications during pregnancy and childbirth. A support person can help, right? And so this was also the process of doulas. Even if we kind of look at the systems that we had, a lot of times, once the woman was pregnant, you didn't even get to see her. Like the women took her, and she has to be in a space where her energy is always at the highest level, because that energy is also producing on. It's something that's being attached to the baby, right? And so a lot of times in the system to protect that and then keep making sure that her spirits is high and she's in the right mood in the right space, the 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 women take her and put her in a space of just full care. But that comes when you have a system that's based around the mother, right? That's but why? Because the mother is something that's the most vital part of the society. Not only the most vulnerable, but the most vital. Right. So when we talk about Black women of all socio-economic backgrounds are facing life and death challenges, right? So when you talk about Blackness appears to be the only commonality that decreases a birthing person's chance at a healthy pregnancy and delivery. If she is Black and birthing, she might be in the fight of her life. Just simple and plain, right? So the only thing, and that mind you, this study was based off of, they also broke that up on whether she was educated, more educated women still dying, Black women was dying at a higher rate than even less educated white women. So none of these things mattered. The point was is that you're not getting your medicine on time, you're not getting your band-aid, your band-aid, your bandages changed properly or on time. Uh, they're not necessarily feeding you the right things. If they're feeding you, um, just in general, when you tell them how much pain you're in, they don't take you seriously. It's just multiple factors when we talk about that kind of leaves them open. And so having somebody that's more connected to you spiritually is one way that can actually get you through those situations. We see more women, especially Black women, are being able to kind of get going in that direction. And you can kind of see them building a community where they're able to protect themselves, right? And so we even talk about it in the school system, right? Our kids in general happening to, rely what we call our participation. in some of these systems. And this is where it kind of comes into how we educate and why we educate each other. At some point, we're going to have to make a financial sacrifice in order to not only educate each other, but in order to shelter each other, in order to feed each other. So when we talk about school resource officer fired after arresting 6 year olds, right, was taken into custody on on the suspicion of battery when she alleged uh, when she allegedly had a meltdown at school and ended up kicking a staff member, taken to jail, right? One study found that over 70% of the youth with an arrest record later dropped out of high school. So 7 out of 10 kids that end up going to juvenile hall get it, or that end up getting arrested, just go ahead and just quit altogether at some point. So when we talk about from preschool to prison, right? A lot of times we talk about it from the black male standpoint, but I think a lot of times people forget about the criminalization of the black girl. So the system still operates against us both. So when we talk about black youth are 30% more likely to report sexual victimization by facility staff, and female youth report more than twice the rate of forced sexual activity with another youth at the facility. So we can't even necessarily, I can't even imagine what this even does to your psyche going into once you, and this is what we talk about once you enter into the system. We only end up getting put in a vulnerable predicament. This is when problems and issues, and this is why not only education has to be something that's that's centered around the community that we build or the foundation. The foundation has to be the community, but also the discipline. Because we got to figure out a way to where we're not in the discipline, we're not creating more unhealthy people. And so things like being sexually victimized or even physically abused when you in these type of situations, these are things that later on play out on the other people, right? So even when we talk about the attack on the hair, excluded from school for their natural hair, girls of color explain why hair is a part of their identity. Why do you have to say that being you is a part of your identity? You in your natural state. Why? Because it's an attack on it in general. And this is what we even talk about, not only just the attack. People think it's just an attack on our culture. It's an attack in general on us. It's just a lot of times they slickly do it by attacking our culture. That's how a lot of times they able to do it undercover. But they hate you so much they can't even much hide it enough to just even let you slide on you in your natural state. For some reason, you in your natural state seems to be a danger to them. It rubs them the wrong way. They don't. It's like they don't know where you at mentally. My hair is one of my favorite things about myself. I feel like it tells a story of who I am. Right. This is what happened to 13-year-old Aisha. Aisha was suspended from school for a week because she was told that her natural hair didn't adhere to the school regulation. So this is an issue, and even in itself, this is an issue that has to be spiritually resolved, because in her psyche now at 13, she's been told that her hair is not the standard, it's below the standard. And this is what I be talking about when we talk about the social society in general. Like a lot of people think that's just an attack on our women, but that's an attack on you. That's an attack on all of us in general. Because if you don't see these women as being beautiful, who are you reproducing with? That still puts you in a predicament to where you're killing yourself. And so that's why when we talk about why Whoopi Goldberg has to be the image of stimulus, because a lot of times they use Whoopi Goldberg as the standard in order to also turn most of us against Aisha. Because unfortunately, I the system isn't the only one that attacks Aisha, but socially, a lot of times we attack Aisha because we look and say Aisha needs to be fitting the standard, which it kind of tells you that in a big way, we're buying into the same standard. We're falling into the exact same trap. That's an attack on us. And so that's why I say, and that's how they slickly. That's a part of the invite. I think one time I was talking about how like the only way like a vampire can get can get in is through an invitation. You have to invite them in. This is one of those. You're inviting in this virus in a way by through your participation. And so you kind of and that's why like I really kind of hate the direction that when we talk about like night a lot of people was talking about like Chris Rock, but like just the comedians in the 90s in general, even just in general before the 90s, it was just like horrible attacks on us and how we look and our very own features, to the point where it made these things easy to be the butt end of the jokes. Like think about it. Most of the jokes from the grown comedians, those things, however they made it, somehow they made it onto the playground. So a lot of people didn't even think like, well, yeah. Shout out to the Happy Companion. I appreciate you, God Body. A lot of people kind of looked at these shows as just something that was like um or the parents thought that they could just watch them and not and just keep us in the back room and not have to talk about these jokes with us or deal with these type of things. But the next day in school, those same jokes ended up on the playground with us. And now we're in a vulnerable state. You don't have no defense over your blackness. When you're in a circle and your blackness is what's the joke, there's no defense for that. You that puts you in a that puts us all in a vulnerable state, because early you start finding out that you aren't the standard, but not only are you not the standard, you're below the standard. That's a psyche we have to fight against. You can't look at darkness in a negative light when you're the dark people. It just doesn't make it's backward and it's damaging to our own psyche. It's damaging to our spirit. We carry over these same jokes. Those jokes hurt. We seen what some people do to their what they whatever to around the lineup of their head and stuff like that, just trying to hide it because they feel like it's below the standard. They end up just ripping it out, damaging it over time, trying to hide it. So that fight isn't just something of the system, but that's also a fight that we have to have amongst ourselves. You got to be able to fight against that in your own heart. So I think in a lot of ways, I think we have to not only stop attacking each other, and in that instance, I think we'll also not stand for what they deem as the standard. And that also comes with our choice of participation. So we talk about racism in itself. They said it even compounds in domestic violence against black women, acknowledging that this is not the same as denying violence against white women, right? So you talk about Aisha Frazier's ex-husband received a jail sentence of only 9 months in 2014, right? For brutally assaulting her in front of her children in his car and was subsequently hired back into the same community, right? He had received a longer jail sentence for it. It is possible that Aisha would have not died due to the domestic violence. Hold on, let me move this real quick. Shout out to Sunshine. I appreciate you in the building. As so many black women do, right? So Dr. O'Neill was left as an unnamed victim while a police officer also killed by her former fiance, right? Dr. O'Neill was relegated by numerous media outlets to the position of an invisible silent victim. Just another murdered black woman whose life and life savings medical work came second, even third to the work of the police officer, right? And so even a lot of times, like I said, even in this instance, this is when we talk about her being in a vulnerable predicament because she's not put in a independent, a financially independent state. She wasn't financially free. So not only was she put in a predicament where he could come right back out and come right back into the same, and she's in the same spot wherever he's looking. But she did. I can almost guarantee she didn't feel like she had the financial freedom to necessarily get herself out of that environment in general. And a lot of people get stuck in a situation on both sides because they don't necessarily feel like they have the financial stability to get themselves out of an abusive relationship, which can be, and the reason why I say on both sides, because it doesn't necessarily just go down to physical abuse, it can be also mental abuse. And both sides can participate in mental abuse. It can definitely happen. So when we talk about finding the courage and hope, financial support for women experiencing domestic violence, right? So when we talk about the impact of domestic abuse on a finance, when we talk about it as far as finances, right? An abuser can assert control over the relationship if a partner is economically dependent. Financial abuse occurs in 98% of domestic violent cases. And so a lot of times we hear a lot of women are thrusting themselves or wanting to thrust themselves into being in an economically dependent situation. But now you open yourself up for economic abuse, financial abuse. Think about that. Because that begins, and that's why I say we talk about there's a certain mentality that also comes with this. And this is what I be meaning by it. That ain't what women need. Because just like it's a different incentive or a different respect factor that's given to the person who's cleaning up the hospital room and the person that's doing the surgery, it's the same respect as the person who's bringing home the bread and the person who's cooking. And that's what people try to overlook when we talk about living in having a patriarchal mind state and living in a patriarchal society. And a lot of people don't even understand in general. Think about the psyche when we even talk about when we refer to even work. We even refer it into like and we put it in like animalistic terms. You're going on the hunt. Like it's multiple factors that kind of go into that mentality. And so yeah, you'll hear the argument maybe that a Kevin Samuels is saying, and then you hear the argument that the other side is saying. And to me, all I hear is that one wants to impose financial abuse, and the other one doesn't know that that's exactly what they're getting ready to step into. Think about that. An abuser can assert control over a relationship if the partner is economically dependent. Financial abuse occurs in 98% of domestic violent cases. That's an estimated 736 million women are subjected to the physical or sexual violence by an intimate partner or from a non-partner, meaning that's just somebody else that they damn relying on financially. 59% of the people credit is negatively impacted by their abuser. So not only are they are they financially abusing you or trying to assert control over you because you're economically dependent, but also they're trying to keep you in a state of economic dependence. And a lot of people, that's what they're asking for and don't necessarily know it. We talk about victims of financial abuse collectively lose a total of 8 million days of paid work each year. 70% of domestic violence victims are forbidden to work by their abusers. So a lot of people are kind of missing that because the society and the social structure has no incentive for the not only the woman but for the mother for there being an economically independent mother. That's true freedom. So when you look at somebody who's being or you can just because you can see them being physically abused and you look at their situation, you say, well, why don't you just get out of that situation? The abuse runs a lot deeper than what you think. Because not only this does this impact how you view how you're gonna be able to protect yourself, but a lot of times you're in a predicament where you got little ones. And if you can't see yourself or a way of feeding not only yourself but your little ones or housing not only yourself but your little ones, that puts you in a different state of fear where you can't move. So when we talk about even in a lot of these abusive situations, they've even been able to create help from the underground, right? Secret network rescuing abused women from life-threatening situations. It's a system created by women themselves, right? How were they able to do it? By trying to get each other economically free, economically independent. At least three women have been rescued from life-threatening and abusive relationships in recent times, and several others are being assisted by a secret underground network. The secret network operates in a similar fashion to the Underground Railroad and is made up of former victims of abuse, trained counselors, justices of the peace, pastors, lawyers, businesswomen, and others who are sympathetic to the needs of battered women. So not only were they able to create a system, but a system that's also safe. Main ways that they were able to do this is by putting the women in an economically independent state. So that's true freedom. If we talking about if you really want to protect black women, you'll put them in a predicament where they can protect themselves. You'll build a structure for mothers in general to where where they can be financially free and they can be economically independent. And from there, we can start now creating a healthy environment and in creating healthy people. You said three out of, hold on, let me check. Let me go back. At least three women. Oh, on this one, this was just three women in general have been rescued from life-threatening abusive relationships in recent times, and several others are being assisted. And let me make sure you wasn't talking about something else. Go back. Make sure. Yeah, I think that's the one that you was talking about. Yeah, it wasn't out of three. It was so far in recent times it had been three women. Yeah, yeah. I think that's definitely a part of it. But I think also I think just I think we've got to get them though in in a position to where part of being financially responsible, a lot of that deals with your mental health. And sometimes, a lot of times, we're doing things to make us feel good to kind of overcompensate for, certain issues that we are having on the inside or what we look around at our environment causing certain type of depression. and different things like that. So a lot of times our depression and our pressure from outside, that also determines how you spend. I think even when you talk about like the market, they always say don't never buy stocks when you under pressure or when you really need it, or you know what I mean? Because your kind of emotions can kind of like take over, and you make bad decisions. You make buys that you necessarily probably wouldn't make, in a normal condition. But when you're bored, because it becomes gambling for you. You know what I mean? Now you creating a new high and shit like that. So I think, I think in general, but though that environment in itself cleans up once she's not there. Because part of the reason why the environment is even the way it is because they all have to huddle in one place because they're not financially free. And so not only are they forced in a small space, but then they kids is forced to try to get along with it. Like it just don't really work like that. Nobody's kids is really given that space. Nobody is it, it's like like I said, it's so many different ways it kind of goes. But I think it is a dangerous situation where um there's no incentive not only for her to be economically free just as a mother, but also as a working mother in a society where work is a necessity. And it's in a society where working for most people is a necessity in order to eat and different things like that. Is the mother is almost demonized for having, what I mean, for becoming a mother. And not only that, it's no incentive for the most part becoming a mother in this current society. A lot of ways it ends up being a setback for you. And this is like I said, this is just you dealing with it from when we talk about, because to me, and this is why whenever I talk about that capitalism in general, m- most of our problems are economic problems. Most of We talk about most of our mental health, most of our most of our issues in general are just economic problems in general. The attack and a lot of it is because we're attacked economically. And I think we try to overlook the attack on us, and we kind of try to, I think a lot of times we blame ourselves, because I think for the most part, when you kind of hear people's discussion, it's almost they have the discussion as if Black people have just been financially illiterate, and that's been the issue with why our conditions haven't changed. But when you really kind of look around, and whose condition is necessarily better than ours? I think a lot of times the people mention the Chinese, but in America, you got like I think it's like two places, New York and then like Seattle. Outside of that, they're not running shit. People even say, I think some people try to make an argument for Latino, but that's in certain pockets and places. When you come to the South, that's not the case. So I think sometimes our situation is kind of looked at. We don't really kind of see where the attack ain't really there. The attack is on the infrastructure. A lot of times they're building the infrastructure on top of us, and it's happening. And it's happening because they're able to control how political power is distributed. every day. So those are like the dangers that we kind of run into. And so a lot of times we had a discussion is if just creating businesses is what's going to fix our problems or banking and spending with each other. But nah, I think when we talk about financially and different things like that, now it's a lot more to it than that. A lot of it is going to rely on first the first base is creating an independent economically independent mother, and that's first. The mother has to always be able to be free, not only financially, to just be able to make whatever move needs to be necessary, whether that be with schooling, that be with like I said, education or um, medical attention or um, living conditions, moving conditions, food, all of these things that to a mother she has to have the financial stability and financial freedom to be able to make that choice. So the society in itself has to first put that first. That's who's creating the society, birthing the society, nurturing the society. That's who's holding on to the tradition for the society. And a lot of times that person is getting relegated to just being a baby, somebody that's just called a baby mom, as if they didn't just create life. And that's something that's different. And I think that's it's a lack of respect for that. They're able to just flip the term a single mother and use it in a way that's, in a negative light. But somebody who created is somebody who created, and just trying to relegate them or, down or, to just being a baby mama as if they're just a hindrance on society when that's the very backbone of the society in general. No, they need to be able to be financially free. They need to be able to have the financial freedom to get the mental health that they feel like they deserve or need. The time that they need to take off in order to tend to the kids or the pregnancy or complicate or any of that. There should be no pressure there. But like I said, that's gonna come with us in general and how we view that starts with us and how we view each other first. Then once we reestablish that and the importance of where where that woman stands in society, then we clean up the thing. We start to see more healthy people being created and the community being more healthy. And we go from being able to say that people are independent and they actually being able to get into situations and 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 make decisions not based on financial distress, because that's what's happening. Shout out to the dog. Yeah. So it's and a lot of times that's where we're making our decisions is out of financial stress. financial turmoil because we want financial stability. So it's we in that way now you begin to start losing because the aspects now you're kind of the things that you are now caught worrying about is more it becomes naturally those things are like superficial. And so more so the things that are kind of important about a person, you're kind of finding out later and paying for it. You kind of finding out that y'all have no spiritual connection later. You kind of finding out that you know that intimacy is that you guys have a your intimacy is maybe low for each other later. Shout out to Tequila. I appreciate you in the building, sis. So a lot of these things you're finding out later because you're making a lot of decisions, marriage decisions, girlfriend decisions, even just a friend decisions on who's you're gonna allow to know, your information and different things like that. You're doing it under financial distress. Because out of financial stability, not because you genuinely built a connection with the person, not not because you guys have created a soul tie, but for financial stability, and now now we're left open to being victims of financial abuse. So if we're talking about any type of evolution in society, especially if we talking about for women, then the first thing first is the mother must be financially free. If we're claiming, and this is where the idea in general, when people, they come with the doctrine, the black woman is God, is the black woman is God. I say that the black mother is God. And if the black mother is God, then there should be no question on whether or not she should be able to have not only, I mean, whether or not she should be financially free. We can't have her in a vulnerable predicament to not only have to rely on the system, but also rely on abusers. That's a dangerous idea. And like and like we, I mean, and this is what we see: an abuser. As I'll read it one more time: an abuser can assert control over a relationship if the partner is economically dependent. So the ideology that we go in when we move it forward, even with our daughters in general, you had like that she has to be having the only thing that can be instilled in her in order to make sure that she's avoiding the 98% is that I make sure that she's economically independent, or at least that she has the mind to be economically independent. I mean, I think a lot of times we overlook that part, and that's where it's easy to blame the victim in those situations, in situations of abuse. It's easy to say why she just won't leave. It's a lot easier to say that than to look at whether or not she's financially dependent. Yeah, I think having things that are finite over the federal notes in general. Shout out to Akasha, appreciate you in the building. Power to the dark side. I think in general, yeah, I think um, holding on to things that are kind of like finite, like gold and silver and copper, it ensures you that you're going to be able, because these things are always going to be tradable, and at some point we already know. I think whether people, they want to play the game or not, we're moving into a cashless society. I mean, if you still getting a check, that shit is primitive. Like, think about it. If you still getting a check and you gotta go somewhere and cash it, motherfuckers look at you like that shit is primitive as hell. Like, nigga, you ain't got direct deposit. So, you know what I'm saying? It's obvious kind of for the most part what kind of direction we're going in. People, you getting put into more situations where people less want to touch money and stuff like that. And I think in general, the monetary system breaks down. I think you're gonna need gold and silver and copper and other ways and other things of trade too. Rubber it'll be something that'll be valuable. Oil. Um, I mean, it's all kind of things that different commodities that are actually smart to kind of invest in. I think that's also one of those things where you don't want to put your eggs in one basket, and that's not only financially but also whatever you actually get. Maybe that's something also that you don't necessarily have all in the same spot. Because I think a lot of times another thing we don't really look at is being in the air, being in the space to kind of get to those things, right? Things may break down necessarily where you are, and you may have to actually, you might have to have a separate space on the way on your move, making your move that you stop on and and get some of the stuff that you need. Yeah, I think also, yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that we talk about there is a problem. All black mothers don't necessarily, but I think in general, I think all black people don't necessarily have the right mindset. I think I think, and mostly, like I said, mostly that pressure comes from being in financial turmoil. And I think we'll be able to create healthier people in general once we're able to kind of get these people out of out of making decisions and out of financial duress, right? Oh yeah, so yeah, when you talked about Bitcoin and stuff, I'll be honest with you. If there's ever a time to get into crypto, this is like the time is like right now. It's like your second chance at it and making it and catching the run. I think though, I think for us, I think Bitcoin is a bit steep. I would go, I would go below Bitcoin. I would probably look. I like Ethereum, and not only just because Bitcoin is something. I think Bitcoin is something that mostly countries and bigger corporations will be using. I think when you start talking about more the stuff that we'll be using for transaction, we'll be using commodities that work a lot faster. So it, I more so look at, and I don't this, for the record, I do gotta say this. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. If you are seeking financial advice, it would be best that you get with a financial advisor. This is strictly for entertainment purposes only. But if we're talking about like I, if we're talking about crypto as a person, and you and like for us, and having like something that we can trade or invest in, looking for something that is actually looking at something that's actually more so um like faster on the transaction. Like you want a faster pace on the transaction, because that's gonna be something that because you're gonna want something that's moving similar, like as fast as Cash App operates, right? And so, when you putting something into a Cash App and you get it, you send it to them and they get it instantly. Like you don't necessarily have that process with Bitcoin. Bitcoin kind of takes it takes a lot more time, with the encryption and different things like that. And so as you start to go lower, which these coins will eventually be up there in the price range where Bitcoin is now. But right now you can probably get like Ethereum for like 34. Uh um I think, in general, I think you got the altcoins that are getting ready. I think a good one also is like XRP. Um I think some of them, it might be even smart to kind of take a look at even the metaverse. They got one actually. Facebook got one, the metaverse and stuff. It's been on a little bit of a dip. And so I think that's another one that you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. But I would be looking for ones that not only do the most transactions, but um, also have the fastest transaction time. So like Dogecoin is one that has a fast transaction time. Uh, I think they got like things with Shiba Inu, but I think Shiba Inu is more of a quick play or a quick trade than more so something that you go forward in the future with. I think more of the solid commodities is probably like XRP, XLM. Um, uh, I think Binance has something. Um, so yeah, just different things like that. I think crypto.com, I think, just created one. So crypto.com is something that's on the rise, and as the more crypto in general gets popular, you'll see more people kind of flooding over there and signing up with crypto.com just because it's easy, and they kind of got more access to more people, right? So that thing kind of goes down. Um, yeah, I definitely do some more financial shows. I gotta be I try to be careful with it. I tell people that like some of the emails and the messages and stuff I got kind of scared the shit out of me, because I'm like I don't I was kind of I had to kind of just lay back from it a little bit, because yeah, like people calling me with what I mean, hitting me up with serious money and shit and asking me what to do. I'm like, damn, I don't want to say the wrong thing when you come see me. You know what I'm saying? Like, hold on. So my main advice is always to secure the bag. That's like the first thing I always say. Um, so it's a lot of different ways that it goes. Um, I definitely will be getting into more different ways, because I think that is on me, especially if I'm gonna talk about creating more so of an economically independent mother. I think I should be kind of showing some different ways that you can be uh, um, financially free, and not you know, somebody who's economically dependent on somebody who's 98% likely to commit financial abuse on you. So, That's a high number. Like I'm just gonna be real with you. I ain't even I forgot the number was even that high. And I really should have drove this point home on task for real. That's a high number. 98% of the domestic cases are financial abuses. God damn. So that's amazing. That's gonna be the first aspect we're going to have to deal with. Even when we talk about crime in the community, that's something that you're gonna have to attack with financial freedom or economic freedom. So it's like you can't just take away the lifestyle, take away the 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 incentive of selling drugs in the community, and you can't replace that lifestyle. I mean, what are you replacing? How often they can eat with, how often they can get fresh, whatever it is. Like, that's something that kind of puts you in what I mean, a vulnerable predicament. So crime is something we're gonna have to it's something that's gonna have to be tackled, financially. Our educational problems, that's still an economic problem. Because a lot of times it comes down to our particular community and our particular schools aren't getting the fair amount of financial support in order to not only get the teachers help keep up with the teachers, but also be able to provide an adequate space for the kids. So even there, we talk about the divorce rate, it's still gonna come down to most of the issues end up being over financial issues, financial pressure, even why they even got married in the first place. Financial pressure, financial duress. The environment that people go and live in. A lot of times they're making the decision on where they're going to live at based on financial duress. So until we can get that burden off of people, it's going to be tough for people to make better decisions. Some people say that when they get emotional, they eat. Maybe you eat bad things, ice cream or whatever it is, shit you ain't supposed to be eating because you're depressed. You gotta understand too, most of us live in a state of depression based on the environment that we look at every day when we walk outside. A lot of people talk about us making our decisions out of anger, but a lot of people don't talk about the decisions that get made out of depression, hunger. Even we talk about our health and how we eat in the different ways. Before we even talk about eating better and the things that we eat, we gotta have the financial freedom to be able to get the foods that we need. Honestly, no. The answer, to be honest with you, Sunshine, no. It's something that's not possible. And the reason why it sucks because it sounds like defeatism in a way, but yeah, and that's true too. I think that's true too. But we got to think too. It just kind of depends. I think when you talk about people on a fixed budget, and I'm gonna get right back to your question, Sunshine. That was actually a good one. When we talk about people that's on a fixed budget, it's kind of tough though for them to kind of incorporate maybe things from uh, Whole Food into the budget as opposed to somebody, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, yeah, and that I think a lot of times the people with low income that kind of eat bad, and more so it kind of depends on where you're at too. I think you can eat decent in our communities, but I think overall even the stores that we even go to eat, even if you stand around the outside of the store and shopping, I think food in general and how it's processed, like Walmart, they took their butcher out and like how the meat is coming in already prepackaged and stuff like that. It's just like a lot now going on that kind of puts us more in the danger than in certain communities, I think. But I think though too we do need to. I think people should be taking more advantage though of the food stamps and how they eat with them. Because if you definitely do have them, it is you should be eating a little bit better. I do believe that. Um, but yeah, to say like the being financially or economically independent in this system, I think from an individual standpoint, it's possible. But when we talk about like the collective of us, like doing things like closing the wealth gap or changing our conditions globally or just even here in America, it's not really possible. Not only because in a lot of ways, like when we're the labor for the most part, we're still the labor, put it like that. And the labor is kind of like moving out of that class is kind of like hitting the lottery for the most part. It's Hunger Games because it's kind of like a cycle that kind of gets created in that class. And so, yeah, there'll be some that break out of the mold, but when we talk about in general, nah, because the system is built on that class. Like they created it on top of us, and it operates for the most part based on us being consumers. So, like, and in order for us to flip or reverse us being consumers, now you talking about us producing not only taking raw materials, getting the raw materials from Africa, but also producing them in the ready-made products. And that's war on a whole nother level. And you talking about that's everything, even everything that you would have to do to even start that process is you gotta do it based on the rules of the game from the people who already set the rules up for you not to be able to do those exact things. Like Africa, they're never going to allow Africa to make their own Hershey chocolates on a on a grand scale, or to produce their own rubber in the tires on a grand scale. There may be pockets in Africa, but they're not going to let the Congo be able to produce iPhone on their own. Yeah, I mean their own smartphones. That kills Apple. You know what I mean? That they're dead on that. So you know they ain't going for that, and the things that you would even have to do to get the infrastructure to do it. Like I said, they already set it up. That's just like I think the dude was showing. Like in order for you to put up a billboard, you not only have to have the money, but you also have to have the permission from the people that you compete with, which would be like Walmart, McDonald's, and shit. And they finna tell you hell no, depending on what kind of what places you trying to have a billboard up in. And so it, that's where it becomes what we want. That's why I say most of the when we talk about um, the infrastructure, that's part of what I was showing in general. We're not really benefiting off of the infrastructure for us to be so attached to it. So it's like a lot of times people make the argument, well, the dangers of childbirth, and what are we gonna do as far as healthcare for women and this and that if we're not in this infrastructure. But when we look at the infrastructure, you're the most vulnerable in it as far as health. And so it's almost like we'd be better off in the first place away from this infrastructure. But it's like the arguments that we make that we're so tied to it is because of the education. But it's like you're the most indoctrinated and the less educated. And then we, it like in every aspect, even with shelter, it's like we got our own problems with shelter. We got amongst us, we got like the highest population who still lack plumbing. So most of the benefits that we even talk about are proper plumbing. Most of the benefits we even talk about in general or the infrastructure that we so attached to in the system. When you look at us as a collective, we're not even getting there, able to really enjoy the fruits of our labor. We're being more so taken advantage of. Shout out to the realest. I appreciate you in the building. Yeah, that's a fact. Yeah, that's a fact. I think I think that's like one of the major issues. I think we don't work enough together. And I think in general, I don't know, I think it just kind of depends. I think it just kind of, I mean, well, not in that situation. I mean, I think yeah, we can't, I don't think we can, climb up if we're going up against each other in that way. You know, I think all we could do it at the end of the day is end up tearing each other down. I think regardless of it, if you're kind of going against each other, it's like, well, what direction are you trying to go in exactly? Because going apart, and that's why I think the dangers of the system is the longer we're in it and participating and trying to use it to come up, the further apart it pulls us. And now it's getting to the point where not only is it pulled our community apart, now it's pulling the men and the women apart, and then the kids from the parents, and like the shit is just getting out of hand. And yeah, to say a single person has different responsibility from a person. Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. I think it just depends on your calling. I mean, you don't know what your calling is. And so I don't think you can necessarily say what your responsibility is. I think your responsibility is based on whatever your calling is. I don't think I think we look at if Mark I think he when we look at somebody like a Martin Luther King, I think if he based his decisions off of what, his responsibilities to the people based on him having a wife and kids, I think in general, I think he wouldn't have been able to make a lot of the steps or the decisions that he made in the first place. And so I think, you know, I think that's where, a sacrifice comes with your calling. There is a sacrifice that comes with your calling. And so there was a danger for Coretta, and there was a danger for the kids, and there was a danger for a lot of people. But at the end of the day, it's more dangerous for you not to accept your calling. And not only that, it's selfish physically and it's selfish spiritually. And you don't know really what's laid out for you. And I think a lot of times, I think comfortability, I think a lot of times, um, people in a lot of ways are kind of maybe, I think a lot of times people are kind of, I think they allow that to kind of dictate maybe maybe the steps that maybe certain people want to take. I think maybe how much danger they're willing to get into, um, what kind of chances they're willing to take. I think it's just a lot of things I think that kind of happen. But I think at the end of the day, I think is you have your calling, and I think certain people have to kind of you know um, I think you got to fulfill. Um, yeah, I think, and and this is where like I think this is a major part right here. We talk about this too, Akash. Uh, a lot of times, and I think this is when we kind of get into when I think I talked about the other day was like the self-reflection. And a lot of times, a lot of the decisions that we are making is is outside, is for outside, and we're deeming it as best. But I think in a lot of ways, I think in that self-reflection, I think in getting ourselves together physically to where not only we able to get ourselves healthy mentally, but also into a healthy environment. Because sometimes creating a healthy and environment is also getting into a healthy and being into a healthy environment. And everybody is is everybody that's in your environment currently isn't necessarily for isn't necessarily conducive towards your health a healthy environment for you. And you may be not conducive to the healthy environment that you currently are in. And so sometimes you everybody may be working against themselves and working against the other. And I think that's where in those aspects you have to kind of get away from how you kind of viewing things from a fleshly aspect and be able to kind of transition and see things from the spiritual. Are you being spiritually fulfilled in the current environment that you're in? Is this an environment that allows you to grow spiritually? And sometimes the environment that you're in does not allow you to do that. And like I said, the longer that you are spiritually hindered, it'll start to manifest itself on you physically. There's something that'll carry you down. It'll bring you down. You end up a lot of times you'll see people picking up bad addictions. You would like all of these different type of things. Things can become physically abusive. A lot of times things would be mentally abusive. But these are all things manifesting because necessarily your spiritual environment isn't you don't necessarily you haven't really created the right type of spiritual environment. And in some type of ways, a lot of times what happens is we're kind of afraid of maybe either losing that love or losing that comfort or that you kind of physically felt, whether or not you know that it's kind of whether or not it's been drained or different things like that. And it's almost similar to like what you falling into the financial independence. It's almost like you have to also find like this emotional independence also, right? Shout out to Miss Ruby Reeds. I appreciate you in the building. Power to the dark side. Peace to Northern Bella. I appreciate you in the building. Yeah, and I think that's something that becomes, you know, I think the other day, I think I called it the cosmic family, but yeah, your soul family or your soul tribe. And I think a lot of times that becomes a much different, a much different topic. And it's crazy because people already kind of create these identities and these connections with people. Sometimes they call them, they brothers in Christ or they sisters in Christ and different things like that. You're kind of creating a soul tribe and a tribe for you, like your own tribe spiritually in a way, right? And that's a tribe that fulfills you and keeps you rooted and kind of gives you mental stability and spiritual stability. And I think a lot of times, when you operate outside of that, you don't really get that same respect as far as you trying to create, exactly what you're building and what you want and what fulfills you. You don't really get that same sort of respect as maybe other people are. But I think when we talk about these spiritual tribes or the soul tribes and different things like that, that's just as important for people outside of the Abrahamic phase as it is maybe for people who are in it. And I think a lot of times we're surrounded by people. We're wondering why things are draining and maybe you have certain animosity and certain types of depression and different things like that. You haven't been able to connect with your soul tribe. You've been disconnected from it. And so you've been trying to live off of strictly uh maybe whatever you feel like in the flesh or whatever it may be, but the fulfillment that you're gonna get from 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 when you find actual your actual community, your soul community or your soul tribe or your cosmic family or your cosmic tribe. Once you find that, now that's a different type of connection. It's a difference in the way that you trade ideas. It's a difference in the way you build each other up. It's a difference in the way that you build each other, not only spiritually, but like I said, this is also what's going to manifest in you in the flesh, into the material world. But I think a lot of times we and this is mainly for I think a lot of people who are kind of outside of the Abrahamic faith, because for us we kind of like spread all around and we're kind of like in the middle of a bunch of people that we don't necessarily agree with, and so spiritually we don't necessarily have people close around us that we have that we can build that tribe with. We're kind of the black sheep of the areas that we are in or the communities that we are kind of involved in. And for us, that can be draining. It can be draining and it can also be stagnant towards your growth. Think about how much further you could be if you were already in a circle with people who not only that you had a spiritual connection with, but also challenged you in a way that it kind of brought the best of you out. Because it's a difference between questioning you and people just challenge and people that's able to challenge you. To anybody can question you, and then they can agree to disagree without necessarily any evidence or it because that's what happens a lot of times. it becomes more so emotional because you're able to just deal with the information. But a lot of times in the circles that we're in, they're more so emotionally tied and they don't necessarily have the information that you do to make the argument a proper argument. So a lot of times it 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 kind of goes somewhere it doesn't have to. But you get in certain spaces and you're able to get challenged by people, and not only are you challenged, but you able to grow from it. I missed something. So yeah, I missed something. Uh, I don't know what's up. I apologize about that, Miss Whitty. But yeah, uh so yeah, yeah, yeah. Um in a lot of ways, like I said, being able to find people that you not only connect with, that once I think once you're able to kind of find people that you're able to connect with spiritually, I think your connection that manifests itself in the flesh a lot easier, a lot smoother. And I think you'll be able to put yourself in a lot safer predicament. That's just simple. That's just very simple. Um, so, like I said, with that being said, this is probably a good note to go ahead and end it. I appreciate everybody coming out. And yeah, definitely.
Depo on the beat.
I couldn't believe it, even when out of eye, and I still couldn't see it. This is much deeper than flesh and blood, nigga, we fighting demons. Been double dared by the devil, and I'm still undefeated. Now you get to watch me get it up out of the mud. I couldn't believe it, even when I was out of eye, and I still couldn't see it. This is much deeper than flesh and blood, nigga, we fighting demons. I've been double dared by the devil, and I'm still undefeated. Now y'all get to watch me get it up out of the mud.
Now y'all get to see me without a mug. Everything that I do gon' be out of love. And I'm tired of these trials and these tribulations. And I'm sick of my name always getting drugged. But no, I ain't budge. All of this money and you not pursuing it. All of this time you don't know what to do with it. Counterproductive and counterintuitive. Why you be acting like you all brand new to it? Straight from the gutter, boy, we getting sewer. As soon as we get it, you know we gon' move it quick. All of this money I made from the block. Get out the game and invest it in stock. Bought me a whip, get the rest of it up. When you saving on stuff, man, it messes them up. We gon' be fine, but we stay on our grind. All of my niggas is stepping it up, and they foot on our neck and no letting it up. We level the playing field, even the battle. My son is a scientist, he's splitting at us. Need us more geniuses, I know we got them. I know it's in us, I'm bringing it out. I know I ain't perfect, I'm making them out. On Capitol Hill, and I'm bringing them houses. The path that I'm on should nobody follow.
I couldn't believe it, even when out of eye, and I still couldn't see it. This is much deeper than flesh and blood, nigga, we fighting demons. Been double dared by the devil, and I'm still undefeated. Now you get to watch me get it up out of the mud. I couldn't believe it, even when I was out of eye, and I still couldn't see it. This is much deeper than flesh and blood, nigga, we fighting demons. been double dared by the devil, and I'm still undefeated. Now y'all get to watch me get it up out of the mud.
We fought hard on this road is longer. Fighting each other won't make us no stronger. Honey, this niggas been fighting this hunger. I'm at my worst and ain't getting no wronger. No change of silence, I'm making it through. I flip a chair or a table or two. They won't believe what I'm able to do. I'm making these movements, this a new movement. My dog at the gate and all praise to the newbies. I'm getting too lit in my boat pack with doobies. On my way up and I break through your roofing. Shot for the moon and it made me a star. Got so much drive I can make it to Mars. Can't promise today that I'll make it tomorrow. Every time that we make is to pay what we borrow. It's to pay what we